So last night I was supposed to do the news of the week video, but I decided to delay it to today because last night I was relatively busy with other commitment. And that after I finish this news of the week video, I'm going to go straight into the preview for this weekend's action around MLS, as we once again is going to have a crazy full slate of action where there's going to be 13 games that is going to be happening in this weekend's MLS action. But either way, talking about the news of the week and in terms of these news in the last week, well, unlike last week where we rarely had any transfer rumors to talk about and there was very few news to talk about in the news of the weeks, this was different this week. I mean, this week we're back to where there was tons of transfer rumor signings and even a couple of players getting contract extension from this week that I have to talk about. But the first news that I got to talk about and the biggest signings from this week has to be Atlanta United officially signing Marcelino Moreno from Lanus as a designated player, and that they basically waste no time in terms of cashing in that Pity Martinez money that they got a couple of weeks back and might have just found a replacement for him. Now, as much as I know a lot of Atlanta fans, and there's a lot of fans saying that he is a very hot prospect coming out of South America and that he could do very well with this Atlanta team and be the similar quality of what Miguel Almiron was with this team a couple of years back, we shall see. We shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case, because we said kind of the same thing when Pity Martinez was arriving in MLS, and even some say that he is even going to be better than what Miguel Almiron is, that is Pity Martinez, and it turns out that didn't quite work out whatsoever. And Pity Martinez, despite the fact that they eventually did get rid of him with a big sum of money, he was definitely not the player that they were hoping that they can replace Miguel Almiron that they lost a couple of years back. So I'm not going to be as optimistic, and I'm going to be a little bit cautiously optimistic in terms of him, whether or not if he's going to be just as good of what Miguel Almiron did a couple of years back. But having said that, this is definitely a very Atlanta type kind of signing, and this is just one of many signings that they're going to make this offseason, where they're going to really trying to bring in the next batch of talent and trying to build a core to get themselves back in terms of competing for MLS. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, is that the Houston Dynamo has officially confirmed the transfer of Alberth Elis from Alberth Elis to Bonavista. And last week I talked about how this was a report that this, of course, could happen. Well, this week it's basically confirmed that he is going to be going to Bonavista. And after years of talk about when exactly Elis is going to make the jump to Europe, the answer is this week. Now, there was no official transfer fee that Houston, of course, got from Bonavista when they sold Alberth Elis to them. But I think in these upcoming days, we're going to find out the transfer fees. And I'm hoping Dynamo fans will see that the Dynamo did get a hefty amount of money to get this deal being done. Because, you know, Alberth Elis is probably the biggest asset that the Houston Dynamo has in terms of selling your asset to Europe, and that if they do not get a hefty amount of money, then Dynamo fans are not going to be happy and feel like this is once again the ownership being too conservative and being too cheap. And it's no wonder why they are always considered one of the cheapest and lowest paid team around the league. Now, the New York Red Bulls have linked with Barnsley manager Gerhard Stuber as their next head coach that is going to be replacing Chris Armas. Now, when I first saw this news, I was, like many people, that was kind of surprised of all team that the Red Bulls are trying to find their next head coach. They would decided to go with a struggling English Championship side that is Barnsley and look at their head coach as the one to replace Chris Armas. But if you go a little bit deeper, Gerhard Stuber, before he was the Barnsley manager, he was actually the manager of the youth academy team for RB Salzburg, and it's no surprise that the Red Bulls are decided to go to a route where they're looking to try to get one of the head coach from their affiliate team, or at least in this case one of their youth head coach, and hope to promote him and bring him to the Red Bulls, knowing the fact that the Red Bulls is another team that is keen to play their academy players to be in the starting 11 of this team. So yeah, I think this will be interesting to see how this is gonna go. I mean, there's already a couple of sources that's saying in the upcoming days or even in the upcoming weeks that this hiring is going to be officially confirmed. But like I said, despite the fact that he has had his experience as a youth head coach for RB Salzburg and that he does have that experience working with young guys, he hasn't had a lot of experience working as a senior team, and that when he was with Barnsley the 1 year that he almost relegated that team into League One. So that's definitely not a really good kind of sign, getting a head coach that didn't do a great job in his last job with a senior team, and that you bring him as a potential head coach to try to get yourself back into cup contention, as the Red Bulls want to do because of this transitional year that they're going through. Now, speaking of RB Salzburg, there is actually sources saying that the Union have a verbal agreement to RB Salzburg in terms of the transfer for Brenden Aaronson. And I know Union fans are probably freak out the fact that in the upcoming days or even in the upcoming weeks, they could potentially lose Brenden Aaronson in their team. But what I heard from the verbal agreement, they said that they are going to not sell Brenden Aaronson until the end of the year, and that they will, of course, decide to transfer him to RB Salzburg until very next season. So, Union fans, you can relax. He's going to stay with your club until the end of the season. But overall, I think this would be a great move for Brenden Aaronson, and that RB Salzburg has a history of doing well in terms of developing young players, and usually this is a destination for young players to go as their stepping stone of making their European adventure. And knowing the fact that Brenden Aaronson is going to be able to play under Jesse Marsch, I think that is going to be a perfect combination too, and that, yeah, I can see this move definitely could happen, and that this would definitely a huge benefit move for Brenden Aaronson if when he decided to make the jump to Europe heading into next season. Now, the Colorado Rapids have signed Steven Beitashour off of free agency, and I'm kind of shocked the fact that it took this long until a club decided to get Steven Beitashour, considering the fact that he's always been one of the better fullbacks in this league, and he has definitely that veteran presence that I thought a lot of teams would have definitely, they could have at least looked at him and bring him into the team, but it doesn't take until now that the Rapids decide to get Steven Beitashour off of free agency. And I guess the reason why they want to get him is they want to improve that fullback depth situation that they had, and also trying to get a player that can start in the spot of Drew Moore that has really been injury prone this season. So yeah, this is a great move for the Colorado Rapids, but in many ways, this is kind of shocking, the fact that it took this long until Steven Beitashour finally is able to claim by an MLS team. Now, moving away from talk about transfer and talk about contract extension, we had two players this week that got contract extension. First, we got DeMar Kreilach getting a contract extension for RSL until 2022, and then we got Bryan Reynolds getting a contract extension for FC Dallas till 2024, and that, I think both of these contract extension makes perfect sense because RSL really want to keep hold of, well, their more important player, that is DeMar Kreilach, and that they're going to get him until 2022. Whereas for Dallas, Bryan Reynolds, he is definitely one of the more upcoming player in their squad that is coming out of the Dallas Academy, and that even though they of course extend his contract until 2024, if he can continue to develop and show the potential that he could definitely have, I think in a couple of years he's going to be sold to Europe, and that I don't think he's going to be there until 2024. But this is just kind of Dallas doing a way where they want to keep their young team, and they don't want to kind of sell them off to any other MLS team, and eventually they of course want to try to make a profit when they finish developing these players and selling them off to Europe. Now, moving away from contract extension, to now talk about Gonzalo Higuain, where, as I mentioned last week, he of course officially signed with Inter Miami, and that he's actually now training with the team, although there is no timeline for his debut, despite the fact that he's training with the team. And I remember when Matuidi was actually officially confirmed an Inter Miami player, it took roughly about 2 weeks before he was actually able to play with the team. So I'm assuming if that is going to be a similar timeline to Gonzalo Higuain with Inter Miami, I'm assuming it's going to be maybe 1 or 2 weeks before he's going to make the debut with this team. And when he does make the debut and start playing with this team, I'm interested to see how he's going to do with this team. Like, for Inter Miami, they really are banking that this is a guy that they were able to get that banging the goals for them, because this is really the final piece of the puzzle that Inter Miami need to complete to be a competitive team. And that if he does not produce the goods for this team, yeah, there could be a lot of question in terms of some of the moves that they made in their expansion year, and that this would be a huge waste of money, probably one of the most wasted money ever since when Giovanni Dos Santos was paid like $6 million with the Galaxy, and for most of the time he was basically just sitting on the bench. And that Higuain even now is making $7 million, and I'm pretty sure Inter Miami would not want to see him do very bad in this league, and they're going to have to force to bench. They're the most expensive player right now in the league, or at least the highest earned player in the league right now. But moving on, in terms of the next news, and talk about injuries news, well, for NYCFC, you kind of want to move away from this part of the news of the week, because I got some bad news for you. First, Alberth, who he looked like he was definitely in serious pain in that last game that NYCFC played. Well, unfortunately, that serious pain means that he probably suffered a torn ACL, and it was the case. He, of course, suffered a torn ACL, and that he is done for the season. And that Maxi Morales, it has confirmed that he is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks with a knee injury, and that at least if there is maybe a good news for NYCFC is that at least Maxi Morales could potentially come back for this season, but that is basically going to be during the playoff time, as pretty much for the remaining of the regular season he's going to be out with a knee injury. And for NYCFC, they want to compete in the playoffs and want to be a cup contender. They really need Maxi Morales in this team, and they're going to have they will not have him for the rest of the season and trying to push for the playoffs. While for Alberth, as I said, it's very unfortunate to see he suffer a ACL, and that, you know, this has been a nightmare year for Alberth. Consider how he was snake bit for a very long time, and eventually he did finally get that first goal against New England, and I thought maybe that his fortune has started to turn around and he can discover his form that he had in his debut season with NYCFC. No, it turns out that was not the case. He continued to struggle in terms of produced goal, and then now he, of course, suffer a torn ACL, and that he is not only going to be done for the season, but he probably might not come back until at least halfway part of next season, because usually torn ACL takes roughly about 6 to 9 months to try to heal up, and since we're now so deep into the seasons right now, it's going to be a while before NYCFC could potentially have it, and by then we don't even know if Alberth is going to be staying with this team, knowing the fact that they probably are thinking of trying to find a striker and are scrambling to try to find a number 9 to replace Alberth, who's out with a long-term injury. Now, for DC United, I do have some good news for you. You are getting some attacking pieces back. Edison Flores is one of those guys that they signed this offseason, part of a big money deal, and that he is now going to be able to come back with this team, alongside with a player that they just recently signed, Jordi Reyna from the Vancouver Whitecaps. He's going to be expected to make his debut this weekend, and yeah, I mean, this is definitely great news for this DC United attack, which has just been god awful for the past couple of weeks, but we shall see whether or not if both of these players will make a big impact and really improve this attack that has just been non-existent sentence for these past couple of weeks. I mean, I know I've been giving a lot of hard time to DC United, especially on how bad their attack is, but you got to also remember they had a lot of players suffer for injuries, and that now that they're starting to get their attack back in shape, you know, I expect DC to look at least a little bit better on the attack, because if that is not the case, yeah, Ben Olsen, he, as I said before, he is going to be the next guy that potentially is going to be in the chopping block. But moving on, in terms of the next news, is that Danilo Silva has announced his retirement and that he is not going to be coming back with LAFC. And I guess the reason why he decided to announce his retirement is because he's been suffering a back injury that's been bothering him, and knowing the fact that he's really dropped down the pecking order in terms of the defensive part, or the defensive depth chart for LAFC. You know, you just feel like eventually he's either going to leave the team or he's just going to hang up his boots, and that it seemed like he, of course, decided to hang up his boots, and that, you know, congratulations to Danilo Silva in terms of his 16 years career, and I wish him the best in terms of his post-soccer kind of career. Now, Player of the Week from this week goes to Bradley Wright Phillips, as he was able to win Player of the Week. Although this week there was a lot of contenders of winning Player of the Week, and it seemed like these past couple of Player of the Week always comes from the player that was involved with a team that had a crazy blowout that they put against the opposition. I mean, this week BWP was on that LAFC team that put that 6-0 thrashing of the Vancouver Whitecaps, and last week when Jordan Morris won it, he was on that Seattle team that put a 7-1 thrashing against the San Jose Earthquakes. So yeah, it seemed like if you want to win the Player of the Week, you better be on a team that can put a thrashing on the other team. And I think next week, I won't be surprised if there's going to be another LAFC player that's going to win it, because guess what? Which team LAFC is going to be playing next? You guessed it. It's the San Jose Earthquakes, a team that has conceded 5 goals or more 5 times this season, which is a record so far this season in MLS, and I won't be surprised if that is going to be a game that's going to be very similar to the 6-0 thrashing that LAFC put against Vancouver, and that I expect that could be a little bit worse than that. We might even see the record for the most goal that is scored in a single game in that game between LAFC and the San Jose Earthquakes. And finally, Nashville has planned for a new training facility to build with, and it's great to see another team that has joined many of these MLS teams is started to build training facility. But anytime whenever I see a team announce that they're going to build a new training facility, it just makes me even more angry seeing one of the team that I support, that is the San Jose Dumpster Fire Earthquakes, that is still have no plans in terms of creating a training facility and still continue to play in a empty parking lot that is clearly not an ideal position to have a training facility for the Quakes. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the news of the week. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these news? And as always, if I didn't mention some news that I put here on the board from this week, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.